Welcome to Civil Discourse, a podcast where participants are free to share their ideas, empathize with other perspectives, and who intend to advance to a better solution to fix a societal ill. We will focus on topics that are particularly complicated. In a time where information is from sources more opinionated than ever, our mission is to find solutions and goals to accelerate the nation's progress with cultural impunity. I'm your host, Todd Furniss. Hello, this is Todd Furniss, and welcome to another edition of Civil Discourse hosted by Todd Furniss. I'm going to be joined today by Dr. Kim Davis, who has both a background in NIH-based research in chiropractic and is also a small business person who is rolling out clinics across the Southwest. With that, I want to introduce Dr. Kim Davis. Kim, how are you?
Yeah, okay, great. So I'm actually a chiropractor. I was not athletic as a kid. I'm a musician. I put myself through college on trumpet scholarship, actually. And so once I got out of school, I got into running because I really wanted to do a triathlon. I was just going to check that box and kind of overcome this fear of swimming that I had and do this whole thing. Well, through that process, I found that I really loved to run. And I was increasing my running mileage to train for these triathlons. And I found that I was getting injured just over and over and over again. And it was super frustrating. And I found myself trying to find help because I knew there was something about the way that I was running that was causing the problem. You know, I was in pre-med at the time and I was all set to go be an ER doctor. I was an EMT and a firefighter and all this stuff and was kind of taking this medical route anyway. And I was like, I know there's something rooted in the way that I'm moving that's causing these problems, but I couldn't really find help. I couldn't find coaches that would look at my mechanics. I couldn't find doctors that would look at my movement patterns. And so I finally ended up in this orthopedist office. I had done all this research to find somebody who worked with runners. And I thought, great, this is my guy. And so I ended up in his clinic and I was having this knee thing at the time. And he did an MRI and he sat me down. He said, Kim, you know, there's nothing really wrong with your knee. There's nothing structurally going on. What you probably need to do is you need to just stop running. You need to take up cycling. You need to take up another sport because running is just really hard on your knees. And I just remember sitting there in this room thinking, you know, this is a total answer, you know, because there's no talk about biomechanics. There's no talk about my structure or the way that I'm running or any of these things that may be causing the problem. So that was a big pivot in my life that day. I tossed his car in the garbage and I had never been to a chiropractor. I had no idea what they did, but I knew they worked with the human body in a really deep way. So I went and I turned in my application and I went to chiropractic school. And I learned everything I could about biomechanics and about the human body. And I got out of school, started RunLab. Through this whole process, I worked through my own biomechanical problems. And fast forward to now, I mean, I've run 50 to 80 miles a week for 10 plus years, no running related injuries, 4 Ironmans, 12 to 72 hour adventure races, ran a 1856 5K at 42 years old, fastest I've ever run. So all of these things brought me to the understanding that if I could help myself, I could help anybody because I was the most non-athletic kid ever. And I really got into running and triathlon and the idea of doing a triathlon in the first place because I came from a family with obesity and heart disease and cancer and all the things, you know, all the bad stuff. And I thought I need to go down some kind of route to health. And so that's what got me going in the first place. So when I started RunLab, that was with the impetus for it was to help other people understand their bodies better and to really kind of change this healthcare system for the better and start looking at the root cause of people's issues, not just be a symptom-based approach like so much of what medicine is. So that's how I ended up where I am now. And then we've expanded. I have my headquarters is in Austin, but we've expanded into Phoenix and Denver as well. And we're working through an expansion now.
There's a whole lot to unpack there, and I'm not going to try and get to it all. What a fascinating journey. And I want to kind of start with chiropractic versus MD. One of the things I point out in my book is called the 60% solution, Rethinking Healthcare, is that ironically, if we did what we were told by our mothers when we were growing up, we would eat right, sleep right, and get exercise. And what I observed is that in the medical profession, and then particularly in med school, doctors and would-be doctors are almost taught nothing on eating right, sleeping right, or getting exercise, unless it relates to the issue associated with, orthopedics and injury, repair. So in orthopedic surgery and that kind of thing. So talk a little about what chiropractic is and how it's different from a medical doctor.
It's funny because when you introduced me at the beginning, you said she's a small business owner and she's a physician. Even that term in Texas, we can't even call ourselves physician as chiropractors. In Oregon, you're required to call yourself a chiropractic physician. So the states are very muddy on MDs, chiropractors, osteopaths. Like there's a lot of confusion in the industry itself about where the lanes start and end and blend and mix in the medical world. I think I have an interesting perspective because I came into chiropractic without any preconceived notions. All I wanted to do was I wanted to learn everything I could about human movement. And I knew that the medical route was not the route to get that. You know, they are very good at the tools in their box. They have surgery. They're very good at pathology and the things that happen inside the body. But they start to fall apart unless, like you said, you're talking about really the orthopedic or the physiatry route or something that really specializes in movement. Unless people go down that path in the traditional allopathic world, they really don't have a lot of tools in their belt to help people with things like low back pain or knee pain related to running or any of these things. Now, chiropractic, every profession has their issues, right? And chiropractic has a lot of kind of woo-woo people in it that sort of think you can fix everything with an adjustment. And I mean, I'm here to tell you that's a load of crap, right? But in the same way that surgery doesn't fix everything, adjustment doesn't fix everything. We need everybody. And so the way that chiropractic and a lot of people like me, there are a lot of sort of new age chiropractors in this field that aren't even using the traditional chiropractic adjustments as part of what they do. It might be a tool in the belt, but really the focus of the care is on the movement patterns and the structure and the biomechanics and the musculoskeletal system. And that's where my focus is in my piece of the chiropractic world, is helping the musculoskeletal system move efficiently. And that's where we get so much training. Medical doctors get tons and tons and tons of training on pathology and internal medicine. Chiropractors get much more training in anatomy and biomechanics than the traditional medical doctor does, who hasn't gone down a specialty route. So that's where sort of everybody has all these great tools where we can work together. But historically, there's been a little bit too much headbutting in these professions because the medical doctors don't necessarily like us, chiropractors don't like them. And I think it's all ridiculous. We should all be in the same, we're all here for the same reason, right? So if we work together a little bit better, we could actually be here for the betterment of the patient.
It reminds me of the quote. I think it was Jack Nicholson who said, "Why can't we all just get along?"
Right? I always use that. It takes a village concept because it does. Like none of us, I can't do surgery. And that medical doctor, I guarantee you, doesn't know how to do a gait analysis the way that I know how to do a gait analysis. So let's help each other because some of my patients need surgery and some of those patients do not. So it's just, it's a flawed system, but hopefully we'll get there. We're trying, right? We're fighting the good fight.
So, and you, I'm certain know this, but this war dates back to prior to 1910 when Abraham Flexner did the Flexner Report and reorganized the entire way that doctors and all of the flavors of that term were trained and then ultimately licensed at the state level. And so there's been this kind of great divergence and I would say to some extent elitism and snobbery perhaps in the professions. It causes people to, either look down or look up their noses at the others in the profession to reach a different conclusion that's not helpful. I completely agree with you. We need all types because they're different focuses. But I think it'd be fair to say, at least I would assert, and I would welcome you to challenge this or confirm it, that this medical doctor bias is built into the industry in such a heavy way that it informs and influences payment models like insurance. And so what is insurance willing to cover and not willing to cover? And because of the strength of the AMA lobby, they're able to get insurance companies to pay for more, even though they may not be able to do what needs to be done, or it ultimately costs the patient or the company more money than it should because surgery is recommended where surgery isn't needed. So is that your observation?
I think that's a great observation. And I would definitely agree with you. I think the roots of medical doctors go back such a long time. And we meaning anybody that's not the traditional medical route, whether that's osteopaths or chiropractors or naturopaths or acupuncture, anybody that's not the traditional medical route, we're so much newer in Western medicine as part of the model. Insurance companies don't really know how to deal with us. Furthermore, the other complicator to this whole issue is that, and like you said, the AMA has such strong pull, but also we don't really have the research behind us. And part of the reason we don't is because we don't use things like pharmaceuticals as part of our patient care. So we don't have the pharmaceutical backing to do big studies. You kind of got to go through these little dose response studies and things done through the individual universities or whatever. But it's very hard. We just don't have the funding behind us to prove that what we're doing is effective. And I think that creates real problems because you can't go to an insurance company and say, hey, look at what we're doing. The outcomes are so much better and cheaper than surgery. But because we can't do that in a large scale, it's very hard to move something as big as the insurance model, move the needle on that at all is so very hard. So yeah, I think there's a lot of things at play, but it is frustrating. And it definitely, there are big walls up for people like us trying to get reimbursed effectively through the traditional insurance model. Huge problem.
But I want to, and you may be a little bit personally different, but I want to emphasize you've done studies under grant issuances with NIH. I mean, you're a very, very competent, well-researched, I'm using the term so you don't have to, physician, scientist, if you will, who's done a lot of deep, high quality research in this space. So you don't come about this lightly, but rather from a very studied perspective.
Yeah, actually, I was part of the reason I went to chiropractic school. I thought that I was going to go into biomechanical research as part of that degree because my interest in that field is deep because of my own experience and my own knowledge that it's lacking in our space. And so, yeah, I got involved in research very early on with a lot of NIH funded, like big scale studies. And I am one for research. I think that we don't need to do things. You can do stuff anecdotally for a while, but then you need to start putting the pieces together and say, okay, we see trends. We need to now prove this on a bigger scale. So I'm a huge fan of research in general. Yeah.
One of the things that we've talked about offline is this issue that's been reported in the Wall Street Journal recently, and really over the last several years, with insurance companies buying clinical practices. And so they're now, insurance companies are directly employing physicians. And it's not gotten a lot of media attention. It's been kind of buried in the journal and not gotten a lot of attention in other places like Becker's and other well-regarded publications. And I'm sitting here thinking, holy cow, United now employs well over 50,000 physicians. Is that disclosed? What are they doing with their networks? If they're employing doctors, are they putting downward pressure on the amounts they're reimbursing physicians who are in network but not in their employ? And then also, how are they doing with regard to keeping networks open? There are network adequacy and diversity requirements. Are those being taken care of? And I know that you've had some problems with this in your practices in Arizona and Colorado. What's been your experience there?
We've run into huge walls. And even when I moved, so I went to school up in Oregon and moved here to Texas 10 years or so ago. And when I started RunLab in Texas, even 10 years ago, all the insurance companies said, no, we're closed to new providers. And I kind of had to wiggle in through being a specialist in certain areas. We treated a lot of pediatrics at the time. So they let us in only because of that little area of expertise that some people didn't have. But they said they were closed even back then. And so when I've expanded the company in the last year to Colorado and Arizona, all of the companies say, absolutely not. We are not taking new providers of any kind, even with the specialties and even with what we do being so different than anybody else they have in their network, they still have closed it down. And there is just this move towards closing up networks. Like you said, United Health Group buying DaVita and employing over 50,000 physicians and trying to add another 10,000 this year. Aetna bought CVS so that they can put their own healthcare system inside. That whole move towards, especially Aetna and United Health Group, almost moving towards a duopoly is really, really challenging for people like us, because there are a lot of fee-for-service providers out there who aren't part of big hospital systems or aren't part of these managed care groups that are doing things, really great things for patients. And we aren't even an option for these patients that are part of these groups. They can't even choose us. And I think that, my observation, I don't know a lot about this stuff, right? I'm just a doctor trying to focus on patient care and building better systems to treat patients. And when we keep running up against these insurance companies saying, oh, I'm sorry, we don't want you as part of our group, or like United Healthcare did in 2017 and went to a per diem rate and started paying us $65 a visit, no matter how long we spent with the patient, that kind of stuff puts us out of business as these little, essentially small fee-for-service providers. And so I've stepped back from it as I'm learning more about what's happening, and some of the veil is coming up about what's going on behind the scenes with all of this stuff. And as I'm trying to learn about it, I think, well, on the outside, perhaps people would think this is maybe good, because we need a revamping of the healthcare system. We need some cost control, because you've got these physicians overbilling so that they get paid what they're worth. And then it just creates this mess on the back end. So you kind of think, well, maybe this is good. But the problem is that cost control is not translating down to the consumer. It's not like, oh, we employ all these physicians now and we're only paying them $50 a visit. So now, consumer, your healthcare costs are going to go down. Here's your letter saying your premiums went down this year, and here's your big fat reimbursement from all the money we saved. Like, that's not what's happening, right? The United Health Group, they had profits of $6.7 billion in Q2 of 2020 alone. Like, their profits are going crazy. That's where the money's going with this cost control. It's going to profits for the company, not back to the consumer. So not only have the rates not gone down and it doesn't translate back to the consumer in a good way, they've also now decreased the choice that the consumer has. They can't come see somebody like us. And they're decreasing quality of care because they're finding doctors that'll work for cheap, not doctors that are good. So this is going in a very bad direction. And that's what I see as kind of the 10,000 foot view and my limited knowledge of the world of, all of this stuff.
Well, you've got more knowledge than a lot of people. What most people don't realize is that individuals don't ever negotiate either with the provider or with the insurance company. Most people get their insurance through the employer. The employer gets it through a broker who gets it from the carrier, who negotiates with the state.
Yeah.
And so they have a committed loss ratio under state law. And so what they're doing is they're managing to the loss ratio. It used to be that the loss ratio was 94%. So for every dollar they got in, they would pay 94 cents back out in claims. Well, now that loss ratio is hovering around 65%. And the difference is admin and profitability. So that's a problem. The second thing that I would assert is what I'm hearing you say, and I'm going back to my law school class in antitrust, this just reeks of anti-competitive behavior. You would think that they would want competition. You'd think they would want people like you to come out and offer new and different and innovative services. But instead, what they're doing is they're crushing it, meaning crushing your ability to provide those services, in part because there's no privity of contract between the individual patient, and you under their plan. What they've done is they've kind of sucked that oxygen out to say, look, we're going to pay for your healthcare. It's going to be a layaway plan for healthcare. It's not really going to be insurance against catastrophic loss. And as a result of that, you're going to do exactly what we say, exactly how we say it, and exactly when we say it, and nothing else shall matter. And if you don't, then we're not going to cover it, notwithstanding the fact that you pay $3,000 a month and for your family of four as your monthly premium, and your deductible is outrageous. So to me, it's a much, much bigger problem. And what we ought to be doing is encouraging the direct relationship with you and and organizations like yours, which are providing good quality treatment with measurable results, quite honestly, in a different way. Let me ask you this. So obviously that's one behemoth of an issue, but there's another question, which is HSAs, health savings accounts. Now, if you used money out of your HSA, you would have a beneficial payment structure. So health savings accounts, your tax advantage, whatever you put in there, you get to keep, and you can roll it forward, as you know, and it's owned by the individual. And whatever money in there, if you invest it, whatever interest it owns or whatever dividends it pays or whatever equity increases that accrue back to that individual's account. And you can roll it from one year to the next into perpetuity. And if you pass away, you can will it to your spouse. Now, I would like to see it be willed to your children or your grandchildren, but nonetheless, right now it's just to your spouse. So, but if you paid for your service or a service is not covered, you have the benefit of tax advantaged dollars going to the payment structure. But the bad thing is you don't get to count that against your deductible because it's not covered by the insurance plan. So it's a little bit of a tweener, but it seems to me that some help would be provided to the individual if we at least have HSAs expanded so you can put more money into your HSA if possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of HSAs too, because people can use them. They can get the care they need. They can go to specialists if they need it. They can go to a place like ours. I'm a fan of HSAs. And like you said, rolling over, I mean, you're putting money in. I feel like you put so much money into paying for insurance benefits. And then if you're healthy, which is what they want, you never really see the rewards of that. But with an HSA, at least you can get the preventative care, because that's where the system really falls apart a lot of times, is that they don't want to pay for places like ours because we're considered preventative. And that is just not the way the healthcare system is set up. They want to, if you have an owie, they want to rub on the owie or they want to cut on it, but they don't want to stop you from getting the owie in the first place, And I think that's where we fall apart. But with HSAs, that's something that we can actually focus on is preventative care. And so, yeah, I'm a fan of HSAs too.
And I think we really need to move to a place that you're describing, quite honestly, which is more primary care use, more preventative care use, more wellness focus, more patient engagement, and alternative forms of care that allow patients to get the best care possible for their particular needs. And again, I go back to the statistic that says something like 80% of all protocols in healthcare rendered by physicians, the medical doctors, I should say, are not empirically based.
Right.
And that was the whole point of Flexner, was to say we've got to go to this empirically based medicine model. Well, we're still not there, and we're 110 years later.
Right.
So we got a long way to go, but what we can't do is, in the absence of empirical data, we can't quell things that work, especially where there is research that supports the quality of work that's being provided by people like you. So what under Title 22, if I recall correctly, I think that's the statute, insurance companies have 3 obligations for anybody seeking to be in network. And the 3 things are, first of all, you have to give everybody a fair shot at being in network. The second thing is you have to respond to proposals timely. And the third thing is you have to have a network that's comprised, and this is important, of a diversity of providers. Now, the last one, I would assert, includes everything from the business model that the individual provider provides or employs, the type of service being rendered, the qualifications of the individual rendering the service, the whole 9 yards. And so it seems to me that under all 3 of those, organizations like yours should find their way into networks. So what are they telling you is the problem? I mean, this concept of our network is closed is like, wait a minute, how does that work?
Yeah, I don't actually know the answer to why we're being told that we can't get into network. We've actually experienced inside of one company, I forget which company it was, but my guy that's handling the contracting for us, if he asks to be escalated to find out a little more about why we're being denied, it goes to a line that just hangs up on you. And this has happened over and over and over and over again. That is their system is, oh yeah, we're going to transfer you. And then it just hangs up. And so it's been a very, very frustrating situation because all these companies are just kind of running their own show without much oversight as to the process. They don't really have to tell us why they're denying us because there's no recourse. What are we going to do? If they say no, what do we do? Sue them? How's that look? So we're running into this from all these carriers. And to me, all those reasons that you mentioned, we should absolutely fit, right? We're sending applications in a timely way. They're saying it should be open to anybody who's interested in at least applying, yet they're not even giving us a reason why they're denying, other they're saying we have too many doctors, we're full. And it doesn't, and we are, just kind of to your point you made a little while ago about the way that we need to shift around towards primary care and specialists and everything else. The old days of the GP that shows up at your house with his little black doctor bag and like tells you, diagnoses whatever ails you, those are gone, right? So having specialists and people that are really good at what they do, instead of all these kind of jack of all trades, master of none, which is what we have in so much of the healthcare field right now, the more we can go towards a specialty model, the better patients are going to get better so much faster. I don't claim to be an internal medicine guy. I'm not, come to me for your knee problems. Don't come to me for your, whatever you got going on in your gut. but we need those people, we need everybody kind of less well-rounded, more pointy, frankly. And I think that if the insurance companies were putting a bunch of specialists on their panels, patients would get the care they need to get better much faster, because our numbers are very good because we stick to our lane and are good at what we do, and we send people out for things we don't. So that's kind of a sidebar, but to answer your question, I don't know why they're denying us. They don't give us reasons, and they don't give us an appeal process. There's no like, oh, this is what you do if you feel like you've been wrongfully denied. They just say, no, sorry, we're full. Better luck next time.
This is kind of a random question, but have you ever called the CEO of the company and said, hey, by the way, have you ever listened to your own IVR? Have you all listened to how you're called?
To get to that person. I would love to make that phone call, but as you can imagine, there are many layers between you and the CEO of Blue Cross that we've actually tried that method, and going through LinkedIn and trying to get wade through that mess. But yeah, we're actually trying a lot of different routes that are sort of creative, getting people that have been in the healthcare space a long time, and even on the healthcare law side of things, getting those people involved, because I've been in the business long enough now. Between me and my business community of people, we know some pretty high up people in the medical world and in the insurance world and the hospital world, people we can ask, what do we do here? And they all say, we don't actually know. And why is that the case? If an insurance company says, no, we're not going to put you on our panel, there should be a process for understanding why. And then is there an appeal process? It just seems natural that would be the case. But it's an interesting, very messy world. So yeah. I don't have an answer. I don't know.
You think that the state insurance departments would have a very significant concern here. So, and I'll give you one experience I had, which is analogous in frustration to yours. I was working with a hospital group, and I asked if we could get a network, and they said no, or they actually didn't really respond, much like your experience. But I went down to Austin, your hometown, and I said, hey, I want to meet with the top people who are in the insurance commission and the insurance department. And I want to talk to you guys about what's required to go into a network. And I want to understand what the network composition is for each of these carriers. And they said, well, okay. So I sat down, and that's, in preparation for that, that's how I came up with the three things. And so I said, you guys collect reports from these insurance companies on a periodic basis, likely quarterly, right? They said, oh, yeah, we do. And I said, okay, well, can we get copies of those reports so we can understand what the distribution of service providers is and what the composition is? And they said, no. I said, well, isn't it public information? They said, yeah, you have to go through a freedom of information request for that. I said, okay. So, being the knucklehead that I am, I hired a lawyer, and I submitted the freedom of information request and got the reports. And so then I said, I called them back. And I said, these reports are unintelligible. We can't figure these things out. I said, can you help us with this? And they said, no. And I said, why is that? And they said, because we don't understand them either.
What? Right?
So we got fairly frustrated, but we couldn't make any inroads at all. So I share your frustration, but this is something that the state regulators, that's their job. That's what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be creating a fair process for providers to get access to patients if you have to go through insurance to get access to the provider. So I'm very much at a loss for this, and I'm hoping we're going to have an opportunity to take it up with legislators. You can rest assured that I'm going to have folks on the podcast here where I'll make that inquiry, and I'll do it on your behalf, though not by name. Because one of the things I do worry about is that you can't really litigate this matter. First of all, you can't afford to litigate it, not that you're not in a very successful business, but no one can afford to litigate it. And then second of all, if you get the reputation of having litigated the issue, then you're regarded as quote unquote litigious, which means that nobody wants to work with you because you're litigious, which it's a circular argument and grossly unfair. But this is, to me, is the essence of antitrust law and anti-competitive behavior. And it's very, very frustrating. And I think everybody in the industry ought to be rooting for you and for companies like yours to go out and be able to provide the service that you're quite capable of providing and really helping a lot of people without having to go through surgery. Your analyses are fantastic, and you help patients get back on the track or back on the bike or back in the even if it's just back on the walking trail more rapidly than surgery would. So I hope you will keep up
I think one thing that I think was an interesting point. What are the three things you said again about that everybody should have a fair shot at applying, right? It should be timely, and then it should be a diverse group. Were those the three?
Yeah, you have to have a fair shot. You have to respond to proposals timely, and then the networks have to be comprised of diversity of providers.
Doesn't it give you pause that not on that list is efficacy or any kind of merit-based anything? I mean, why is it that just anybody who wants to apply, as long as you'll work for $50, you're going to have the same shot as somebody? I mean, just, I've got a couple of the numbers. We did a 500 person survey inside of our company and came out with some pretty awesome numbers. I mean, just really quick, the subjective piece is that 92% of the people that walked in our door had pain that was rated or disability, moderate to severe. 93% of the people walked out with none to mild, right? And the only reason that matters is because from that, the numbers are that 25% of the people that walked in saw somebody 10 plus times prior to coming into our facility. And when they left, 85% had to see nobody else. And that means that, some people are always going to need surgery. We're going to always refer if we're not the place. And so some of those people would naturally need to go see somebody else after us just because we referred them. The large majority of people need to see no one else. 97% of all of those people didn't have to have surgery for anything. So we're very effective at what we do. And we see people 4 to 6 times and that's it. We're good. So why is it that these insurance companies are not operating based on merit or efficacy? They're only looking for warm bodies that'll work for cheap. Like, that's a problem too, right? So anyway, just a sidebar, but ultimately a big question in my head that constantly I wonder, why are they not adding more effective doctors? Why is it about just doctors that'll work for cheap? Is that really the model we want? That's bad for patient care. It's also bad for cost. We're good at what we do and we do it fairly inexpensively. We do it in very few visits. So why would they not want more people like us in their networks? It's a very confusing situation. But anyway, sidebar, but I think really
the cynic in me says, well, the reason for that is because medical doctors aren't getting referrals and they're not able to refer into their own networks, which then causes a decrease in the overall systemic revenue and profitability.
Right.
There you go. So just to put that in a crisp focus, you just say, you just mentioned that the people before they got to you had been to somebody else 10 or more with no success. And they came to you for what, 3 times or 4 times or 5 times and got the problem solved.
Yep.
So if they come to you first, they would have come to you for 3 to 5 times and gotten the problem solved and not done the 10 times at all.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. Which is, in theory, that's what we want. That's cost control, right? Like, that's the right kind of cost control. It's not just pay doctors less.
Here, Dr. Davis, perhaps you just uncovered something.
I mean, yeah, it's interesting, right? So, yeah.
Well, I as I'm sure you could see already, I could talk to you for hours. I'm so grateful for your time, and really hope that you can get through this maze, this matrix, if you will, onto the other side. It's important that you're able to do your work and that patients enjoy the benefits of your services. And I hope that that this podcast may serve as some help in that regard. But we're going to continue to work on this issue ourselves, and we'll keep in touch. And I'd love to have you back again sometime to follow up. But thank you so much for your time. And again, for those of you out there who are listening to this, please refer this to your friends. We really want to get a lot of traction by word of mouth, because our goal is really to genuinely advance the goal in solving problems. Thank you so much, Dr. Davis.
Thank you so much. Lovely. Great to be part of it. Thank you.
Thanks for watching this week's episode of Civil Discourse. To learn more about today's topic or our guest, visit www.the60percentsolution.com or www.tfip.group.